And ready I am. That's because it's 4 o'clock. And at 4 o'clock, we go live.
No net.
That's it. No editors. Nobody. Wait, what? I need to shut up? Oh. Just kidding. Hey, Kenny, how are you, sir? Good to see ya. Right on time. We do this twice a week these days at 4 o'clock, as some of you know. Also, I'll post a timestamp copy up on YouTube and Twitter for your viewing pleasure shortly hereafter, sometime tonight. Today is the 8th day of December 2019. Hey, Scott, what's happening, man? Good to see you, too. Hope you guys are having good holidays. What is happening? We're in our home planet setting here.
What's happening? Well, actually, home planet, but we're going to go overseas for a few minutes.
Okay.
Overseas to France.
Ready. The transporter is ready. Kablamo!
Okay. Yeah, good deal.
That's right.
Yep, to France.
That's right.
The France's worst, there's two things we have here that are kind of interesting. France's worst strike in decades enters the second day. Apparently they have 800,000 people all over the country. And what happened was, it was interesting. Last night we went to a party, Ms. Jimmy and I, and we had some people, some very dear friends of ours, just got back from Europe.
Right.
And they said it was a nightmare because they ended up in Switzerland, but then they had a connecting flight from Basel to Paris.
Canoe across
whatever. I mean, the place was all striked out. Nothing was running. No airplane, and hardly any airplanes. The subway, the metro, whatever. I mean, everything gone. I don't even know if Uber was working. I mean, I don't know. But they said they waited 4 hours they stood in line for 4 hours to wait for one thing. Then, of course, as they said, they got to Paris and their flight home, as they could waive it. They saw it because it had been delayed, but not delayed enough. And so they waved that plane goodbye. And then it had to reschedule, and of course they had to stand in another line to reschedule with everybody coming back to the United States. So they ended up, what normally should have taken, I don't know how long it takes to get from Basel to Atlanta, or to actually down here to Gainesville, but it took them, 24 hours or something. It was way beyond anything. And the reason was because of the strike. Now the strike is because of the pension. Now, we've seen other strikes in South America, for instance, over the rise in gasoline prices. We talked about this before.
But that's not why the strike is bad, though. I mean, that's why there's a strike.
Right.
And that would be fine under normal circumstances. If you had a company and they wanted to strike because of their pension or whatever it is, and they had collective bargaining. The problem is, and the reason that makes it so horrifying, is because it's a single entity. And it's 800,000 people. Right. So they all strike at once, and it paralyzes the country.
Right.
And
these are public sector unions.
Well, right.
Because the government owns all of the railroads and all that stuff. And of course they own their pension funds.
Right.
I mean, that's where you have.
So there's no competition.
No.
At least not on a grand scale.
Well, what they've seen is something that is...
Do they allow Uber and such? Go ahead.
I don't know about that. I mean, you're not going to Uber from Basel to Paris. So, take me there. No, so at any rate, what happened, what's interesting is, as, what's her name, the Prime Ministeress of Great Britain said, Margaret Thatcher once said, socialism is just peachy until you run out of other people's money. And that's what's happened here is the pension funds are running out of money. And Macron and these people have figured out that they can't, that there's no money to pay the pensions. And so they're going to readjust. They're going to redo them. Apparently there are 42 entities that do the pensioning, whatever it is, and what Macron wants to do is to combine them all into one. And of course it's pretty obvious what's going to happen. If you have no money, they're going to, and of course the mandatory, not mandatory, but the normal retirement age in France is 62. And of course, these guys, as they are here, living to be 82. Mm-hmm. And
now, is this a real they don't have any money, or is this a fake they don't have any money? I mean,
well, it's public sector. I mean, the question is, it comes out of the general budget. Mm-hmm. It's kind of like, remember now, our Social Security, whether you know it or not, mm-hmm. the Social Security is in part of the general budget in the United States. Okay. It's supposed to be cordoned off. But for all intents and purposes, it's not. What happens is every
It's
time
in a lockbox.
it's a lockbox. That's right, a lockbox. And of course, what it is, as you well know, we've talked about this before. It is all Social Security is a package of IOUs
Well, it's debt, but I mean, they can theoretically collect that debt from
us.
Yeah.
From the currently living. The thing is that the
Well, I mean, they can sell it
pro-
on the open market. I mean,
yeah, but who's gonna buy those bonds?
it's a few $1 trillion worth of bonds.
Yeah, it is, and but
Well,
I mean they're not going to be
If they
paid.
had to sell them off en masse, it would affect the market. But generally speaking, they could recoup the money. But even so, all right. So, but what we're getting at is
Getting into the weeds.
yeah. Look, the question is, I mean, again, my point about the France situation is that this wouldn't be a big problem if it wasn't a centralized authority. That is to say, if one pension fails in a transportation company,
Right.
okay, 20, 40 people,
Right.
it's a problem, but you can sue and there's different things. But if all of the workers work for one company and they mismanage the pension funds, guess what happens?
Well, they have mismanaged them, obviously.
Right.
And they do it here. And of course, what happens is, in this country, when they mismanage pension funds, they still go to the government for a bailout. There's some kind of federal pension saving program, which hardly ever works, but they're supposed to have something like that. Yeah, they have a fallback. Like when Chrysler, a lot of the pensions, as you know, are underfunded because they spent the money on something else. And Social Security is a classic case. It's way under. It's the liabilities on Social Security. The present day liabilities are trillions of dollars.
Well, I keep hearing about these about the various liabilities and how everything's underfunded, but what I don't see a lot of are people in picket lines or anything out in front of. I mean, this is with the big public sector unions, but you don't see it really for small companies. I mean, I don't know if they figure out how to work it out of their normal budget, or I don't know how much a normal pension.
Well, what happens is I tell you what is happening in this country, and a lot of times a buyer, a guy like Danny DeVito and other people's money would look at a company and say there's this huge pension fund all invested.
Right.
They were fully funded, and they would say, "Whoa!" and they buy the company and loot the pension fund.
Right.
But the point is that governments always loot the pension fund. The pension funds, the Social Security, and the trust funds are always looted, and they make no bones about
They're
it.
precarious to begin with. I remember when I was a kid and somebody described to me a pension. They said, "Oh, I'm going to get my pension," and I didn't believe them. I was like, "What? You mean you get to stop working and they're still going to pay you?" I was like, "That's nuh-uh."
Well,
I just didn't.
Well, the point is, look, if there's no difference, that was a benefit that a company would bestow on an employee.
Right,
But
it's a bargaining
before that, you saved your own money. You had your own pension money. You took 10%, you put it in the bank, and when you finally got around to retiring, you had a nest egg.
Well, of course. And not only that, but the pension was a contractual agreement.
Right.
You would say something like, they would say, "Look, if you stay in for X number of years..."
Right. You get what they call vested.
Right. We're going to match you or whatever.
Whatever they're going to do. But they lied.
Well, it's a hard bargain to uphold at the back end, because
who are you going to sue when they go bankrupt?
Well, exactly. If the company collapses, there's nothing much you can do. So it's risky. So it has to be a big payout. But it usually wouldn't be a problem in a small company. But when we have the government.
Well, again, I do know that when IBM was running into some trouble, for instance, maybe 20 years ago or something, and they started buying people out for, and they would say, "Well, you're going to relinquish your pension, but here's a cash up front now."
Right.
And that's what they did.
And it's all voluntary.
It's all voluntary, right. But again, one of the little minor problems is when you have taxes that are supporting out of the general fund, as they do a lot of these things, they have some of these pension funds, but the problem is they're underfunded. They don't collect enough. People are retiring, and then the idiot people are living too long. I mean, the fact is that when they do an actuary,
what are you doing, man?
Yeah, what are you doing, living? I mean,
that's the actuary's fault. Too bad.
No, well, actually, I can tell you right now, there have been, as we've seen here, we had a guy, one of our accountants here, called out the city commission, and the city commission promptly fired him.
Well,
We don't want to hear that news. No, when you do an actuarial thing,
that's the bad news.
Actuaries, for instance, work in insurance companies.
Right.
Now, most insurance companies, when you pay for an insurance policy, those are pretty much fully funded. Those people are legit. Insurance companies generally don't go broke. And
yeah, they have the biggest buildings in most.
Right, that's what I'm saying. They have the biggest buildings, and they're not underfunded, and they make sure. Now, of course, there's been some problems in the last 10 years or so. One of the little problems is when the actuaries were figuring on a 30-year, 40-year thing, they'd been yielding 8%, and suddenly it dropped to 2%. They got a problem.
Well, and also when they pass a law which mandates certain payouts for certain things, it distorts the prior calculations.
Well, except for the companies. The companies don't pass laws.
No, I'm saying with
the federals. Yeah, the feds. Oh, yeah. Well, that's right. You can never trust them. So anyway, the bottom line is they're underfunded also in France, and the people are obviously upset because it's looking like they're not going to get their pension money, and so they're striking, and it means that there's all these delays. And it's interesting because we have one of our cousins once removed over there who is Alex, I think, is in Paris right now with his girlfriend, and I don't know what he's doing. Again, walking, I guess. I don't know what you're doing.
They're young people.
They can do it.
Hitch a ride.
Well, anyway, speaking of
a bus.
Speaking of France, see, this is another place where they can get their money. France plans a revolution to rein in the kings of big tech. Now, Trump was over there and said, "Look, if you start to tax the Jesus out of Google, our companies, Google and Facebook, we're going to put tariffs on champagne and some of the other stuff." Yeah, that's what he said. I mean, so anyway,
you could let them fight it out. I mean, what's the big deal? So they put a bunch of taxes on Google, and then Google doesn't give them access to Google.
Well, yeah. Well, good. I don't know about that. Well, okay, whatever it is. Yeah, maybe they could raise their prices or something. But anyway, I thought it was interesting that the guy who is the French Digital Affairs Minister is named Cedric O. His last name O with a period. Mm-hmm. So. It says the taxes are just a start. Future moves could ban acquisitions or make companies share data with rivals. Yeah, no, that's right. And so during the press force, President Emmanuel Macron said President threatened to impose tariffs on French goods, such as champagne, in retaliation for a new tax on large tech companies. And what they've done is, on these large ones, they've set if you earn 750 million or 2 billion or whatever, that's when you get taxed. It's a wealth tax is what it boils down to.
Success tax.
Right, it's a success tax. So they have become but of course, how do you think they justify it?
They helped you succeed. You didn't build that.
Not quite. The tech platforms have a footprint in our economies, and our democracy is a huge challenge for public power. What they're worried about is the companies are becoming so influential that they're influencing and so the public power, the people with the guns, have said, "Hey, stop!" And by the way, so he said said during a visit to Wired's offices in San Francisco on a week-long cross-country trip that involved meeting lawmakers, regulators, and academics to discuss
out the tribute.
That's right, to discuss antitrust tactics. He says they are about restraining tech's power.
Sacrifice to.
And he says France's digital services tax is just the start. Despite the ire it's drawn from companies, Trump's trade representative O described this as simply a warm-up. These taxes on Google and Facebook.
We are just getting started.
That's right. Well, I thought it was interesting because this is. I'm not sure exactly how they do it, but it essentially amounts to a wealth tax, and they want to make sure you have competition. They want to break up the companies in France.
Right.
That's what they really
they're
want.
Like our socialist over here, their concept is simply, look, government is there as sort of a success evener. And it takes from the successful and it gives to the unsuccessful just to make society better.
More equal.
That's right.
Equal outcome. We don't care about your equal start, but the equal outcome is what we care about.
Right.
White privilege, who knows what.
That's their theory, right, which it's totally wrong, because the only thing you can possibly guarantee is equality of opportunity.
That's it. And so when you start to delve in on, I mean, they're gonna screw this up royally. And of course, then you have to ask yourself, how is this going to be divided up? You think it's going to be political? No, couldn't be. Yeah. Anyway, let me move on. Let me move down here to Florida.
Okay.
The U.S. official Pensacola shooting suspect was Saudi Air Force officer. I mean, this has really gone off the deep end. This guy, one of our allies. And this is, you just say here, the Florida Naval Station shooting suspect was an aviation officer in the Saudi Air Force, and the FBI and other authorities began investigating the incident to determine if it was terrorist related. Well, since I wrote this, they have found out, they still don't know, but all the stuff they found out, the guy was converted, he was an Islam person, all of them were. They've got 10 other people and suspects that are all anti-American, whatever it is, the whole deal. They've done some research just in the last...
So what's the big deal?
Well, the big deal is, and this is what Trump says, or at least, I don't know if it's been Trump, but some other people saying, hey, what are we doing training all these people if they're going to start shooting us up?
Well, we never know who's going to be the shooter. We probably have tens of thousands of people like that we train various places.
I don't know if this is tens of thousands, but he says military from around the globe attend Naval Air Station in Pensacola for flight training. The shooter opened fire in a classroom. The attack, but prior to that time, they had gone they found out that they had gone to see some movie on mass shooting and stuff like that. Whoever these people were, and there's still a couple of them at large.
Right.
They don't know where they are. They don't know where they are. The one guy got shot dead, or maybe one or two of them anyway.
Yeah, to me, the only problem with this story is that this is a gun-free zone again.
Right. No guns allowed on. How do you get it in there? The no guns allowed at the Pensacola, and they had to call on the cops from Pensacola to do the deed.
Great.
I mean, they couldn't even go and unlock a locker or something.
I'm stunned that we have that a military base is a gun-free zone. It just doesn't even make sense to me.
It's just on every level. You think about all the places that would be, and of course we've seen this before. You remember years ago there was that fella who shot up someplace in Texas, and he was a Muslim guy.
Well, it's happened at a few military bases.
Yeah,
I think of always the beginning of the movie Transformers.
I didn't see that one.
Well, and this is a little bit off, but it's one of the best movie openings ever.
Really?
Oh my God! It is
the original Transformer.
Yes, the original Transformer. The first 7 minutes of that movie, the first 5 minutes, whatever it is, it's fantastic. And what it is the scene is the Transformer in his transformed shape as a helicopter, as a Black Hawk helicopter, comes and lands at a military base, and then proceeds to kick ass. And it's just fantastic the way that they do it. But in, of course, today's world, what would happen is there'd be no resistance because they wouldn't have guns.
Yeah, yeah, right. Well,
but no, I mean it's a military base overseas, so everybody's armed to the teeth. But still, that's what I think of. I'm like, well, how can you not? How can one guy with a 9mm?
You think you at least have an MP?
Oh, I'm with you. To me, it would be
very least
everybody should be, military base should be the last place that you...
you've got them in schools now, okay?
Yeah.
And not on a military base.
I would put them back in schools. To me, I think gun-free zones are a bad situation. I mean, you're not going to have any major impact because, once again, people need to realize that these mass shooting incidents are so far and few between.
Yeah.
We're still looking at fewer than 1,200 victims for the last 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
And it's tiny. It's super rare that people are off their rockers completely. They have made the decision based on a butterfly that flew through their house today.
Yeah.
There's no possible way you could write an algorithm which would predict who these people are going to be.
Oh, well, no, wait a minute. I'm coming to that.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
No.
Sure.
I've got a story on that.
Okay.
Not so fast.
Yeah. Oh, you talking about the Scott Adams one? Is that
No.
Okay. Well,
No.
That's
Another one.
All right. Anyway, so the thing is, though, military bases, yes. Schools, I would anybody who any teacher or administrator who is with former law enforcement experience should be able to carry, and just.
Yeah, well, the thing I worry about people with, those are the people I really worry about because they got PTSD these days. I mean, if they've been over there...
But they know, look, nobody with PTSD is going to be packing heat looking for a...
They might get hired and something triggers them. This is what happens all the time. You know, they get hired. I've got military experience, and I will defend the kids. And then suddenly,
they're shooting the kids up. That
well,
has never ever happened.
You know what happens is you hear a firecracker or bunch of books slam on the floor, bang, and you know this guy goes off the deep end.
No.
Yes. I'm right on this. I know what I'm talking about.
They run away at that point. They don't pull out a gun.
Well, they do if you're in the Broward County Sheriff, you run away. But that was down there in Parkland.
All right, what else you got? What do you got?
Okay, Bernie Sanders back on the trail, I guess. He unveils a plan to boost broadband access and break up the internet cable titans.
See, this is another guy who wants to. I changed the Constitution. I wave my hand.
So his now we've had Medicare for all or whatever it is, but now he wants high-speed internet for all. And what he's worried about, they did a little stats and they found that people out on the sticks, 38% of them or some number, whatever it is, half of them don't have high-speed internet.
This is the kind of harebrained scheme you come up with when you don't understand what the free market does.
What the free market does? Well, of course, what they do is they look at something like the Tennessee Valley Authority, or they look at the tax that was on telephones for years in order to run the wires out to who's
Well, they can look at a government project and see we built the Golden Gate Bridge. Right. There's the bridge.
Yeah,
right there. You can see it. You know,
don't know what else you could have done with the money, but you got a bridge. Shut up. Yeah. So anyway, he. What he wants to do is he says, and this is what he did. This is the demonization of these things. Democratic presidential candidate calls to treat internet like a public utility, which, as we know how well they work, public utilities are not that great.
They're horrifying, but yet they are
because they're a monopoly.
I'm with you. And they charge horrifying prices because of that, and give horrifying service because of that. They're ruthless, they're cutthroat, they're merciless, they're all those things, and they're lauded right now as being the example of socialism in our society that works for everybody.
They are.
From some people, they're one of the examples that's held up. Look, you like your utilities.
Not in this town, we don't.
Well, no, and in fact, give us some competition, and let's talk about what we like.
They're not going to do that. Well, I'll tell you, in this town, we got.
They don't see that as a monopoly. It's so strange that the left sees monopolies in private companies. They'll look and see Facebook and say there's nobody that can challenge them, even though there's a bunch of people who can challenge them.
Absolutely.
And yet they look at the utilities company and they don't immediately think, well, shouldn't they? It's like they bought the whole argument about, well, it would just be a waste. It would just be that's the old argument for the public utility.
Right. Well, it's called duplication of services. They say, well, you're not going to run two electrical wires.
Nobody would do that.
Nobody would do that. Yeah. So we're just going to take it over. Well, I know that in this town, for instance, what our city utility has done is to buy up the competition.
We used to have our money. I mean,
that's what I'm saying. But we used to have, for instance, an independent gas company. So you could have gas heat because we have natural gas all over the place here, and you wouldn't have to put for electrical heat. Well, no. Now, of course, they buy, and then they built our biomass plant here, which is being unused. That was to supply electricity that we don't need. So, yeah, that's another story about that. I'll cover that anyway. What Bernie says, to go back. Price gouging profit machines, he calls Comcast, AT&T, and Verizon. Sanders would create, right off the bat, $150 billion in grants and aid for local and state governments to build publicly owned broadband networks as part of the Green New Deal initiative. Now, how many levels is this wrong? I mean, $150 billion in grants to cities and states, or cities, I guess, to build networks. And these people are going to be putting their
honest, forthright.
Well, here's our proposal
uncorrupt
to put high
lean proposal, our lean, cut to the bone proposal.
The proposal would also break up what the campaign calls, quote, internet service provider and cable monopolies, which of course it won't. We have a cable monopoly in this town, and it's just nothing. It's almost. I'm not saying it's a complete 100% monopoly. There are ways around it.
Dish.
Huh? You can get Dish, right? And the only other thing that they were going to do was, of course, they have Cox Cable, which is a franchise, so it's essentially a monopoly. But the city now wanted to put their own fiber optic thing around and everything, and so there was a big deal about that. And so, basically, no competition allowed.
No, well, there's no competition. Yeah, exactly.
So he wants to
to the internet.
He wants to prevent anti-competitive mergers.
Of course.
Sanders and rivals for the 2020 Democratic presidential nomination have pushed to boost high-speed internet access for rural and low-income Americans, saying it had become a necessity to succeed in school and business. So once again, as soon as it becomes, quote, a necessity, the government wants to take it over. It's just stunning.
Well, he doesn't understand. That's exactly what the market provides, is
and it
necessities
really does.
For people.
Yeah.
Food, shelter, clothing, everything. If you need it, the market, there's somebody there that will offer it to you through the market. Even transportation in France. They don't need to have a government and a monopoly system. If they would just let it be, let people compete for those things, let the competition figure out how to make things cheaper and better, faster, they would be.
Well, of course, unfortunately, some of that stuff comes under it's got to the point now where you have to have eminent domain, for instance. If you want to set up your own rail line, for instance, you
don't have to, though. They could just simply sell that stuff off.
Right, they could sell it off, or the railroad companies could lease it and that's what they do in England. In England, when you take a train, you can. There's like 4 or 5. Correct me if I'm wrong. It may have changed since I was there, but when we were there before, there were 4 or 5 train companies, and you could choose which one you wanted to go. Now, a lot of them were on the same tracks, but they were coordinated, so it worked out.
And that would make sense because they would maintain their cars differently.
Right.
They would have different amenities and different speeds and offerings and such. And yeah, I mean, look, the infrastructure doesn't need to be uprooted or revamped from what it is, but to the extent that people need those services, they're willing to pay some amount. And we've seen what happens around the globe in the last month or two when the government has subsidized energy in Iran.
Oh yeah.
In South America, what was it? Where was it? Peru or
Chile.
Yeah, Chile.
One of those, yeah.
Yeah, and I mean there were 2 countries down there.
They were subsidizing gas at below market rates.
That's what I'm saying.
And so suddenly they realized they were going broke, and they said, "Well, we have to raise the price."
They put it back.
There was a big
riot because there's this huge change. Look, people make business mistakes. That happens.
Right.
That's why you don't want that. That's the force that keeps businesses from getting too big and centralized. Is nobody trusts one person to run a company that gets too big. So you have to have specialization at some level. And so, but governments, they just
there's no accountability for them. That's the problem. You don't get fired in the government if you screw up. You just don't.
Well, or even if you do, it doesn't matter because the damage is done.
Right. That's right.
If you have some giant system like the France pension system and you screw it up and there's millions of people that are going to go without their pensions, you've injured. The injury is gigantic.
Right.
And whereas in the private system you would have been relegated to a lesser position.
And right, it can be bad. I mean, if Chrysler goes bankrupt, it's bad. It's bad.
That's right.
But they're
it's bad.
It's bad. Well, anyway, let me move on.
Go ahead.
Here. And this is a halftime light note.
Okay.
Banana duct tape to wall by Maurizio Catalan sells for $120,000 at it's a thing called Art Basel in Miami. Now, this was bad, but it gets worse. Arguably one of the most talked about works at the time was a banana duct tape to a wall that sold for $120,000. This guy, MC, I can't remember his name, I can't pronounce it, and it was called The Comedian. and it sold for $120,000. Now, apparently, he's made a couple of other things, I don't know what. But needless to say, immediately, the memes came up, and people were, duct taping wrenches to the wall, or like one I saw where they took the little... one of the little elves, the elf on the wall or what, and duct tape that, I'm taking this for 60 grand. You can have it half price. So you can do anything once you're, and apparently this guy's kind of an outlier, and he makes fun of the art community, and people buy it. I mean, when you pony up...
I'm not buying the people buying this. And to me, this is...
You don't think that somebody paid $120,000?
No, I think it's a prank all the way around.
Okay, could be. Well, interestingly enough, you know what happened.
Yeah.
Somebody picked it off and ate it.
Yeah. See, I think that guy's in on it too.
You think so?
Yeah. This is
Okay.
They're trying to out Banksy.
Nobody can do that. He was too
good.
I
mean, it's pretty good with the shredder in the frame of.
Right. Yeah. That's right. The shredder in the frame. Well, of course, you were one of the brilliant artists when we went to Paris.
Right.
Because when you were walking through the Modern Art Museum, and you said, I can take a hanger and bend it and do better than that, or something.
Yeah. Well, and we had the 5-year-olds scribblings with us at the time.
Oh, was that? Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Artiums.
Right. Yes, we had Artium.
And we were thinking, man, we could just tape these up.
Tape those up, and
it's real art. It's real into the mind of a child.
Well, not only that. I mean, what would have been great is even the Scotch tape could have been part of the art.
Sure.
I mean, put it up there. This and
it'll age.
RTM 100,000.
That's it.
No, but I mean, you just look at some of this stuff, and they do the meme where somebody was looking at the water cooler and saying, I don't know, that looks pretty, that's arty.
Yeah, exactly. The water cooler.
So, okay. Now here's something I alluded to a few moments ago.
Okay.
An emotion sensing robot launches to assist space station astronauts.
Uh-huh.
An intelligent robot equipped with emotion-sensing voice detectors was headed for the International Space Station after launching from Florida on Thursday, last Thursday.
I detected a trembling in your voice, Dave.
Exactly. No, this gets even better. I'm sorry, Dave.
I think you're agitated.
I think maybe
I'm going to have to remove controls.
So anyway, becoming the latest artificial intelligence-powered astronaut to workmate in orbit. The Crew Interactive Module Companion, otherwise known as CMON-2, is a spherical droid with microphones, cameras, and a slew of software to enable emotion recognition. Mm-hmm. Now, I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Wait a minute, it gets better. Mm-hmm. The overall goal is to really create a true companion. We have those here. We have the girls. We already have. You can buy them off the rack, for God, so to speak. The girls that are your companions, send them up there and see what happens. The robot-y girls. We've talked about those, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
they'll get good.
Well, I'm telling you, this one, the problem with this one, and I'm going to talk about this later as well. I got another ancillary item on this. But this is it's a spheroid. Uh-huh. That is your companion,
Right.
Hey, Dave.
It's nice and warm.
Nice, not hardly. So anyway, it's he told Reuters, we're trying to understand if an astronaut is sad, or if he's angry, or if he's joyful, and so on. Please. Based on algorithms built by information technology giant IBM, and data from CMON-1, which was the first one, nearly identical prototype, and it'll be more sociable with crew members. It will test technologies that could prove crucial for future crewed missions in deep space, where long-term isolation and communication lags to Earth pose risks. Mental health. I
got news for them. So they'll get good at it, and
they had it in Alien. What was the guy's name? That was the
artificial humanoid.
Yeah, right.
They'll get good at it, and it'll be able to, but it'll be decades before. Look, humans are so good at that kind of stuff. What you do is you put a human on the other end of a microphone, and you let the human listen to them, and you just have people who are trained to detect
suicide hotline.
Exactly. It's the guy.
Well, the problem is when it's a 90-minute transmission. But
Well, that is the problem. That is the problem. So I was just going to caveat that. I was going to say, when you start doing missions to Mars and such, and you can't get the instantaneous interaction, then
I think isn't it a 22-minute turnaround or something, depending on where Mars is.
Right, obviously, and so but for the foreseeable future, and also you would have. I mean, this is super pi, and they're not using it for that kind of stuff. They'll have that. It'll be much more useful for stuff like border crossings. They'll have the guy in the cubicle sitting in customs. He'll have his little computer companion there, and the computer will say, "He's sweating. Shoot him!"
What are you nervous about, Dave?
That's right.
Yeah. So, that's. I mean, but I just thought this was stunning to think that they're. I mean, I guess they're going to reevaluate and everything, but the astronauts that are up there, what are they going to do with this thing? This
well, like I said, it's
thing?
not going. This is not going to be part of any astronaut mission for decades.
Okay.
Because they will eventually get the thing good, because you can train a computer to do this kind of recognition, where it figures out whether you're sad or a range of emotions. But it's not going to get nuance for a long time.
But what does it do if you fly off the handle? You know,
it's got a program for that.
Yeah, right. But if it's a spheroid, it can't do much.
Well, it just tells you you're flying off the handle.
You're flying off the handle,
Dave.
Dave.
That's right. Calm down. Do this meditation with me.
That's right. That's right. Like a little go to the yoga room. Yeah. Right. Okay. Moving on to our economy. Let me just see here if I'm going to be out of sync here. This is one of the things that's going to hurt us. We've talked about this before. The crash, right? Today, the jobs report came out on Thursday or Friday, and the market went nuts. Everybody said, "Oh my God, this is the Trump doohickey. We're going crazy. This is the greatest economy ever." Blah blah blah. Well, of course, it turned out at the same time, the Feds, the Eccles House or whatever it is, or the Federal Reserve has pumped trillions into this market.
Well,
their balance sheet now is over $4 trillion.
Right, but they've only put back in an additional $500 billion.
Right. No, I know that. So, but they are programmed to through March or April to add more.
Okay.
And so what they did is the intervention came via 3-day. A lot of people don't know what this stuff is, and I don't want to get too deep in the woods, but they have repurchase agreements.
Yeah.
The Fed took all the securities offered to it by eligible banks. Fed repo interventions take in Treasury and mortgage securities from eligible banks. So if the banks have Treasury securities or mortgages, the Fed will buy them off the bank. And this gives the bank money, cash money, for liquidity, in case people start to want too much money out of it. So it's to stop. What the Fed does is to say, when they talk about putting liquidity into the system, they mean actual cash printed up out of thin air cash into the banks.
There's two different ways they do it. They do overnight lending, which they get paid back the next day.
Right.
And then they are adding weekly liquidity to the tune of, I think, $60 billion a week these days.
Is that what it is?
Yes. And that is permanent liquidity, which goes on to their balance sheet.
Right.
And that's what they've reinflated the $500 billion in the last few months.
Right.
With which they're saying is not QE, but is literally the exact same thing.
It absolutely is.
There's nothing different.
No, there isn't.
And they've announced also that this is the new normal. If you listen to their words at their meeting, they've come out and said that this is now baseline, that we're going to have this type of liquidity infusion going forward indefinitely.
Now remember, the liquidity infusion is money, lots and lots of money that they give to the bank. And what the bank does now is supposed to lend it out. And of course, as you know, when you have $1 billion in a bank, they can actually lend out 8 or 9 billion because of the reserve requirements.
Right.
So what happens is if too many people want their cash out of the bank, then the margin requirements are so low. That is to say, if you only have $50 in the bank for somebody that wants to come in and cash a check, you're illiquid. You're broke.
Well, and that's their argument for participating in this kind of thing is
Right.
they don't want to see the banks.
No, obviously they
Hit
don't.
that-
But the way they're doing it is they're giving the money, the inflationary money. This is
Right.
money that's going to go back times 9 or 10 into the economy,
Yeah, and that's the
which which drives up the prices.
right, and that's the backstop for this particular activity by the Fed. That is to say, this should continue in theory until we see some actual market inflation in terms of what they consider to be the core inflation. In other words, when it gets up to 3 or 4% of real of their inflation, which would be 10% of old inflation, maybe, then that's the only time that they're going to consider stopping this policy, according to the way that I'm reading their statements.
Well, the whole thing is that I don't know if they've reached the tipping point. Well, they've reached it. They're up there pretty far. But the bottom line is, at some point, a government, as we've seen with Venezuela or Zimbabwe or something, they have no choice but to ramp up the printing presses, and inflation goes crazy on those things. That's when you have bundles of money to go buy something.
Well, that's theoretically that part of the cycle. And
Yeah.
the question is, do we get to that part of the cycle, or do they clamp down on it? And
The last time they if they do, here's the deal. If they clamp down on it, we're going to have a dramatic recession.
that's what always happens at the end,
Right.
even if there's
You have a dramatic crash. That's what happened in 1980 when Volcker came in and put the clamps on the Fed. He was head of the Fed then in 1980, and he put the clamp. This is just as Reagan got into office. Put the clamp on. Interest rates rose to 20%. The Fed rate rose to something like 14%. If you wanted a mortgage, it was 14%. I was in real estate then.
so we could sustain that for a brief period of time.
Very brief, and then what happened was a lot of people tanked, went out of business. They couldn't handle it, and there was a reassessment of capital, and it was all over in 2 years. It was all over in 2 years.
Yeah.
And then they had the greatest boom, and then in '84, of course, Reagan got elected by 49 states or something, because that's what happened. They had this horrible, worst
So
depression.
that's probably what's going to happen again.
Well, except that this time it's not. This time it's not 5 billion, or it's like instead of 1 trillion in the whole, you have to liquidate 22 trillion. So that's not going to be good. So anyway, the Fed also bought $7.5 billion in Treasury bills on Friday, and the banks offered them 23 billion. So I don't know what that's all about. I haven't figured that out. So, okay, next item. Here's a law item for you.
Okay.
The Supreme Court confronts the homeless crisis as to whether there is a right to sleep on the sidewalk. Now, what this happened, the Supreme Court meets Friday, which was yesterday, or Friday, 2 days ago, I think, for the first time to determine whether the Constitution gives homeless people the right to sleep on the sidewalk. The justices are weighing an appeal, a much disputed ruling by the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, which, as we know, that's the San Francisco people, whack jobs. Anyway, that last year held that it was cruel and unusual punishment to enforce criminal laws against homeless people who are living on the street if a city doesn't offer enough shelters as an alternative. So either they have a place where you can go, the city funded, or if you don't, then it's cruel and unusual, and you can't arrest them, according to the appeals court opinion. It quoted. Now I don't know. I didn't look up who Anatole France is, I don't know if it's French or not. But his famous comment that the law in all its majestic equality forbids the rich and poor alike to sleep under bridges. That was coming from the courts, and I'm sitting there. Well, what are you talking about? This doesn't make any sense to me. And so the criminalized. They struck down the city law that said to criminalize the simple act of sleeping outside on public property. So, as a precedent, they went back to a 1968 Supreme Court opinion that questioned whether chronic alcoholics may be punished for being drunk in public if they cannot control themselves. I don't know what that was all about. So anyway, the principle compels the conclusion that the Eighth Amendment prohibits the imposition of criminal penalties penalties for sleeping, lying, or outside on public property for people that cannot obtain shelter. And so they're not allowed to criminalize indigent people. Well, of course, they do this all the time. They haul them off to jail, right? I mean,
they do, but they release them the next day. It's usually as part of a roundup for when they want to clean up an area.
oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And they release them the next day because they don't have any real theory behind how they're holding them.
Can't afford to feed them, maybe. I don't know.
Well, and there's that, and also the event is past and everything,
Yeah.
so you don't need them there anymore and that kind of stuff. So, look, what we're talking about here is a fringe group of people that exists in perpetuity in any civilized area. There's always a group that just hangs out outside and around, and what are you going to do with them? And this is sort of the short answer, and I'm with you.
What do you think the Supreme was going to do about this? The Supremes. If this is a thing that's coming,
Well,
they've agreed to take it.
They're going to split the baby again.
Are they?
Yeah, and they're going to make it. They're going to say you can't do it in some circumstances and you can in others. And in certain places and certain times and that kind of stuff, it'll be okay. Yeah, exactly. Well, look, it just comes down to they're just trying to leave flexibility in the hands of the people who are doing this stuff.
Probably they should. Well, it's interesting that you're right about this. I mean, this is interesting in a way when you talk about cruel and unusual punishment. That's like if you hack somebody's head off.
Exactly.
I mean, that's cruel and unusual.
Or not their head, but you hack them up in some certain way and leave them around. I mean, there's a million things you can think of as cruel and unusual that are not this. This was just a constitutional hook. This is, okay, what can we hang our hat on here? Can we make it past a summary judgment on this theory? And apparently they did, which that's one of those theories that's been sort of growing as time goes on. Because obviously what was cruel and unusual 200 years ago was way more cruel.
Yeah, that's right. No, I mean
more unusual.
No, and of course when you think about, until I don't know when it was, but it used to be they get the rubber hose out.
Man, there, like I said, there are volumes of materials about cruel and unusual. No, this is not that. But you gotta hook it on something, and you don't want to have a system that just outlaws people generally. Just, okay, everybody's outlawed. It's your papers, please. And we're getting there. I mean, you'll have an ID, and if you don't have your ID on you, or your ID is not the right.
We got a little update on that too. Here.
There you go. So
let me moving along though. This is another little interim light note. A man was charged for sex with stuffed animals at Target. Now this is down in filed a misdemeanor criminal count against a 22-year-old man arrested for allegedly engaging in sexual conduct with a pair of stuffed animals at Target. And what he did apparently is criminal mischief is what he was charged with. And this guy...
Did he take his clothes off? Or?
No, he dry humped.
Okay.
It says he dry humped until he ejaculated.
Oh, okay.
So, that was like in his pants or something. Anyway, apparently he went to a display featuring the characters from the Disney film Frozen. Now, Disney might want to say something about this. Our fluffies are more attractive than yours or something. I don't know. So then he selected a large Olaf stuffed animal and placed it on the floor and proceeded to dry hump the Cinnamon Snowman until he ejaculated. Well, and of course, what I thought it was interesting, they took him in and he remains free on a $150 bond, $150, to get out. So
they think he's crazy, basically.
I guess I don't know. I mean, he's 20 years old.
Yeah, he's one of these guys that they're out there that they're just off their rocker, just completely. And he's probably harmless most of the time. And
well, this bear didn't think so.
Yeah, maybe not.
I don't know.
Snowman.
They removed them from the display though. The animal. So. That's great. Okay, what I thought was interesting, that a couple of things, we might as well talk about the impeachment a little bit, which is coming up this next week. Maybe you have read something about this. Breaking news. This was the title of this. Breaking news. White House tells Jerry Nadler it won't participate in Monday's hearing, that's tomorrow, as Donald Trump's chief counsel blasts Nancy Pelosi for ordering articles of impeachment before the Judiciary Committee hears any evidence. Well, this is so typical in a way. You remember, we have to pass this law before we read it.
Yeah.
And this is exactly what they're doing. This is the same thing. There is
We have to impeach him to figure out why?
Yeah, exactly. They're going to vote to impeach him before they have any facts on it.
Look, as we've talked about from the beginning, the impeachment scenario is one that does not have any real legal framework around it. So they can do whatever they want. And that's what the rub is. That's where the people are complaining about is, oh, you're not following judicial procedure. And their response is, we don't have to.
Yeah.
And they don't. Dershowitz's comment was, the Democrats are prosecuting it like Stalin, basically.
Yeah.
He said, show me the man, we'll show you the crime.
Right, exactly. Yeah, show me the man, we'll show you the crime. That's right.
So, I mean, to me, his I'm still going with Dershowitz.
Okay, good. No, that's good. I know that. But at any rate, it's interesting. They're not going to participate in their own lynching, which is kind of decent. I think they're.
Look, if I were them, I would throw every procedural challenge in the book at them.
Would you?
I'd bury him in procedural challenges.
Okay.
Why not?
Well,
because the worst that happens is it gets dragged back into the regular court system, in which you have some actual leverage. So, and also you can delay. So you can drag it out, maybe put the whole thing off.
Well, I've seen people that say delay, and other people say get on with it, let's get out of the way. And they've been asking some of these people, what's your end game here? And all they want to do is we want to damage Trump enough so that he won't be reelected.
Well, yeah, of course that seems to be the end game. But so what? I mean, he has to fight against that.
Well, it's interesting because we talked about this.
That's a double-edged sword. That's a question of whether or not some people will blame them if they. I mean, there's a big theory out there that says if they try to do the impeachment and fail, that it comes back to bite them.
Yeah.
I mean, there's even some people like Scott Adams is suggesting, well, if they do the impeachment and fail, then they should be tried for interfering with whatever. But that's not how the system works. It's not like you try the judge after the end of the trial. You don't get to do that.
No. But it's interesting. I think we talked about this on Wednesday. Did we talk about the fact that they had the constitutional, the extra special constitutional people from law schools?
Oh, for sure, yeah.
And they had these people they had credentials down the hallway.
Oh, yeah.
Everything. But then when they
and they had the looks too. Boy, they looked like they were straight out of Central Casting.
I mean, really, well,
bow ties, weird hair, funny hats, everything.
The thing was that they did a little background check on these people and found out that they were making donations to Obama and Clinton.
Well, look, they got to donate to somebody.
Well, I know, but they were big donations. These were $1,000 and $1,200 donations.
Look, these were, and everybody should see this as top men. Men. And the question is, look, will these guys say, and I even heard people say, these guys say that this is impeachable, therefore I believe it, because I don't know whatever it is.
One guy said, if you don't find this impeachable, then there is no such thing as impeachment.
Right. And that's not true at all. Like, it's totally subjective. It's 100, the impeachment thing is almost 100% subjective, because nobody knows what the word misdemeanor means in context with high crimes.
It's just fascinating how many people don't want to wait the 11 months until the election.
Well, it's like you said. There's a group out there who feels like he'll be damaged goods going to the election.
And who's going to run against him again?
Hillary and Corey, which I have revised my theory a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, there's one problem. There's one problem with Hillary Corey. I didn't realize this until just today, actually. The problem with Hillary Corey is that then one of her slogans has to be Clinton Booker.
Holy smokes. Oh my God, that is great. Oh my God, that's fabulous. I mean, I could lose my coffee out my nose on that one. Clinton Booker. That's it.
Now, maybe she goes with it just for the shock value and just
No.
throw it out there as a trolling thing. But that's walking the tight line.
I
there.
mean,
That's some cojones. You gotta have the cojones.
That is brilliant. That is totally brilliant. You have done well, young Padawan.
Hey, I
that's
don't know,
it. No,
I'm
that's
saying.
good. Clinton Booker. Oh my God, that's super. Okay, now we talked also last time about, I think we might have mentioned that about the facial recognition.
Yes.
And
Well-
they're walking it back.
Oh, what, the China?
No, the Homeland
airport?
Security. No, yeah, at the airport.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Homeland Security had said, we're going to have facial recognition for everybody, coming and going, we don't
Right.
care. Now they said not for Americans, or not for citizens.
Man, come on, man. I don't believe it. I don't believe one. Look.
They're going to do it.
Yeah. There is no facial recognition. I'm doing my Transylvania accent. This is my Dr. Evil.
Okay.
No, we do not. The cameras, they're not on.
Yeah, well, they have...
They're not recording.
No, that's
Don't
right.
worry.
This
is not two-way glass.
No, right. Not two-way glass. And, of course, when you look around here, all our telephone poles have got cameras.
Oh my God! Look, everything, everywhere. Look.
Those are not recording cameras. Those
No.
are for traffic
Look,
mitigation.
here, the way I see it, and always will, is like the movie, the Gene Hackman, Enemy of the State.
Enemy of the State,
That's
yes.
the way I see it. They're hacking into Julie's cell phone. She's talking like this. They're looking at her camera to the scene that they want to see.
Yeah.
Right there, because they picked up an active signal. I mean, that's how, to me, how perfect.
Well,
it is.
I do want to tell you, one small digression right now. I finally finished West Wing.
Aha!
For about the second time, and it went on, and they have a new president now, Jimmy Smits, and he's got problems. But one of the things that happened in this was the NSA was tapping all phone calls from the White House to and from Russia and China, and so the president-elect called up the China premier, and he didn't know it was being tapped.
Oh.
So then they came around and they said, you know what, this, that, and the other. And it was a big blow-up and everything, and but I thought it was interesting that he said, wait a minute, you know, what are you doing?
That's what happened with Trump. They got the one hop and the two hop through the FISA court, and they could tap every single person that was within 2 phone calls.
Unbelievable. I mean, just
those,
you know, the president-elect. Okay, can we find out? NSA now, of course, you know, they work for him, and they're tapping us and reporting to other people. Look, we don't think this is a really good idea for him to be calling these people. What are you talking about? That's his job. I don't know. Anyway, what was interesting about that was, even though I finished up season 7 of West Wing, if anybody wants to, it's still on Netflix, and I advise you, there's like 20 episodes. Watch it, and you will see what we're in for the next year. Okay, now this is something close to home.
Aha!
Close to home. Let me go real quick on this.
Close to home, close to the end.
Close to the end, close to home. Let me just see here if... yeah, okay, this is close to home.
Mouse.
It says, supply isn't the problem with organ transplants.
Okay.
There are plenty of donors to
We
meet...
have plenty of Uyghurs.
Yeah, well, no, it's what they have is apparently they have an oversupply of organs because of the opioid people dying,
yeah.
epidemics and everything. And they said that they got plenty of organs available. The problem is there's a dozen or 2 dozen centers where you have. Now I know this because I have a double lung transplant, and I went down to Tampa, which is, we live here halfway between Jacksonville and Tampa. And you could go to the Mayo Clinic in Jacksonville, or you could go to Tampa General Hospital for your transplant. But you couldn't go to both. They told me, if you try and sign up for both, then neither one of us is going to take you, because they're all kind of, this is the way it works. Now this is all handled through Health and Human Services, a government bureaucracy. And so you've got these 29 or 30 or however many there are, I forget how many there are, 60 nonprofit organizations, districts districts around
You just said the magic words.
nonprofit.
Exactly.
So these are the guys that are responsible for, and then it has to go through Health and Human Services to find out who's worthy. And it goes back, and there's a bureaucracy involved in the whole thing. And of course, what happens is when anybody is comatose, or dead but not dead, there's
no profit incentive.
No profit as well, except that they Health and Human Services decides what the organs are worth, decides the price. And so there is a price that somebody. So anyway,
but it's not market price.
No. Come on. A bureaucracy.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, no. But anyway, so what happens is like flies to dung, all the people show up at, when they're going to harvest somebody, they all show up to get, one gets a kidney, one gets this, that, and the other, and the whole thing. But the system basically, according to this article, is essentially broken. In that because of the bureaucracy and because of the way that Health and Human Services handles this, a lot of very perfectly good organs get thrown in the trash. And
well, it doesn't surprise me.
No, it
doesn't. It's nonprofit.
Right.
That's if they had a profit incentive and they were allowed to gouge people, so to speak.
Well, you can imagine the family of the people that are doing this. Wouldn't they like to get 10 or 20 grand or something like that for their loved one who donated whatever it is? God, it seems like only
there's that, and then also, how about it's 10 grand and it's this hospital here, or this guy in China. If it's a 12-hour flight, we can keep this heart alive. We'll give you 100 grand. And
yeah, right. Well,
I'm just saying, if it's a market system, then
there are. I can tell you from personal experience, because various organs have different. When they put them in the cooler, they have a different times.
Right. Well, that's what I'm saying. If it
and some organs can last a lot longer than others.
Right.
And others are like right away. So, and that's one of the reasons these centers that they have, there's 60 of them, but they're all, and they're not supposed to overlap, but here in Gainesville, there was an overlap, and they told me, no, you have to choose one, and of course, if Tampa hadn't found the lungs, I wouldn't have gotten them. That's that simple. So, and even though I was just as close to Mayo Clinic, at any rate, actually I was even closer to Shands here, but they considered me no good. So anyway, I just thought it's interesting to see the system and how it works, how the bureaucracy keeps people dead. I mean, makes people die. A friend of mine was a lung transplant, and literally he died something like an hour before could go harvest a lung for him. Wow. An hour saw it take. So anyway, it's 5 o'clock. I'm done.
Okay. All right. Well, I got one super quick thing.
Okay.
And that is there was a shootout down in Miami.
Yes, I saw this.
A shootout in Miami, and to me, the interesting thing was that nobody could think of an alternative to a shootout. Like, they did it like Keystone Cop style, where they ran up, they hid behind cars with people in them.
Well, there were 2 innocents killed.
2 innocents?
Yeah, the driver of the UPS truck, he was killed because he was the hostage.
They were shooting at him.
They were shooting at because the bad guys were in the UPS truck.
Right.
So they unloaded. They unloaded on the UPS truck, and of course he died. But there was also someplace else another person, I think it was a pedestrian, but was caught in the crossfire also.
Look,
totally innocent.
Here's what you got to ask yourself.
And there was like 220 shots fired.
Assume for a minute all they did was the slow speed chase, right?
Well, he was blocked. The guy was blocked.
Well, then he's got to get out.
Well, the problem is he started firing at the cops. He was in the UPS truck and he started blasting away at the cops.
All right. Well, what I would do is wait for him to run out of ammo.
Absolutely.
And you back off until he's out of ammo, which is like 6 rounds or 10 rounds or something.
Whatever.
How many's he got? To me, okay. I understand that if they open fire at the cops, but here's what I'm getting at is a lot of these situations can be solved in the future if they just follow the person, because at some point they're going to run out of gas.
Yeah.
And they're going to get out of the car, or like they're going to block themselves somewhere.
Yeah, it was blocking traffic. You couldn't get around it, and so they had hemmed him in completely, And so I guess he started, opened up the UPS truck or something and started firing out the door or whatever. I don't know what, but all I know.
Okay, well, I take it back then.
Okay, but apparently the cops, knowing that the UPS driver was there,
Yeah.
unloaded on these
Well,
guys.
look, if somebody's firing, all bets are off, because then they're firing, and then they're putting everybody within range and danger of
Yeah,
more.
they're hiding behind cars. They're not going to get hurt.
A little bit, but I mean that's at least understandable. You can understand them opening fire, but I'm hoping we'll see fewer and fewer of these as they realize they can just tail people, and
The O.J. Simpson running.
that's it. That's all you had to do. No problem. All right, thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon.
That's right, Wednesday.